Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, candidates. Hugh Hewitt. Greetings, everyone listening online at YouTube, on Instagram, listening at hughhewitt.com, wherever you are listening, in your car, on your way to work, at home, or on podcast, however you're doing it. Good Tuesday morning to you on this, the 26th day of May, 2020, in the year of the plague, 2020. We're closing in on 100,000 dead, but I still have to tell you, with that terrible toll behind us, I believe we have turned a corner. This is anecdotes, our evidence of anecdotes. Anecdotal evidence is evidence of anecdotes. That's it. But what I saw this weekend is a country that is reopening. What I saw this weekend is just people have said they've intuited the numbers. They don't have to. I've got the CDC graph in front of me, and its data is always 10 days behind. But 10 days ago, the total number of people in the United States under the age of 25 who had died was under 100. And so people have intuited that this is a risk to old and medically fragile people, and the rest of us are not that much at risk. We'll get it, we'll be sick, but we won't die from it. And therefore, we're not going to spend the summer inside. And boy, people were outside this weekend. And many were wearing masks. When many were wearing masks, many were not. And I don't think it much matters. We will see if there's a spike. But I do think there's palpable optimism, and that's the lead story of the morning in the Wall Street Journal. Optimism over reopening pushes global stocks higher. CNN Business, global stocks rise as reopening optimism takes hold. In the Financial Times, European stocks rise as lockdown eases, boosting sentiment. Singapore has a little bit of a off note to this otherwise widespread commentary. Singapore warns its economy could shrink 7% due to coronavirus, but that is not weighing down equities. In fact, let me bring to you our Birch Gold early market report, brought to you by Birch Gold. I hope you did what I encouraged you to do over the weekend, which was to spend some time thinking about how to diversify. And head over to Birch Gold, hughgold.com, hughgold.com, or send my name, Hugh, to 474747. That's Hugh to 474747. Japan is up 2.5% this morning. Hong Kong, despite the fact that that's going to be the biggest story of the week by tomorrow, I think, is up 2%. England is up 1.5%. Germany up 0.7%. We don't know where America's markets will end, but like the rest of the world, I expect they will have been buoyed by what people sensed this weekend. And I'd like to ask you, 1-800-520-1234. Ben, will you open the phones up? 1-800-520-1234. Did you see it? Did you see people returning to normal life? I still think restaurants are a long way from normalcy, although they've gotten into the hang of takeout, and I doubt they'll ever leave that. That will be an adapted extra revenue line. People will keep their takeout business going. People have learned how to use takeout. They have got muscle memory of takeout. They know how to drive up, and I think they're going to continue to do that. But I think you'll see this week and next, as summer comes across the United States, that people will be eating on the sidewalk, and by the end of the month, they'll be eating inside, and they will have grown accustomed to it. It doesn't tell us anything about the fall, but I talked to one senior administration official over the weekend. There are so many therapeutics, 1,670 drug trials for therapeutics and vaccines are underway. On the Andrew Marr Show, which is basically the Meet the Press of Great Britain, the head of AstraZeneca said, we will have a vaccine by September. That was kind of startling to me. One of his scientists said, we won't know if it works in a scientific sort of way because there aren't enough people to test it on. The incidence of virus in the United Kingdom is falling so precipitously, they're not going to be able to test the Oxford vaccine, which they think is going to work. But AstraZeneca is going to produce whole billions of samples of it, billions of doses of it, so that they can give it out thinking it's probably good. The head of AstraZeneca thinks that we think it works. We're just not going to be able to test it because there aren't going to be enough sick people to test it on to see if it reverses or deters the antibodies from forming if you don't get sick. But generally, I felt that. I saw it. I didn't watch much TV. I just talked to a bunch of people, called a bunch of people. with my own eyes, saw a bunch of people. What did you see? Mark in Dallas. What did you see, Mark, this weekend?
Morning, Hugh. I took a small trip. The wife and I took a trip from Dallas to Arkansas, through Little Rock, Conway, and up into Clinton, up into the Ozarks, and noticed that the majority of the people have resumed some semblance of normality in their lives now.
Did you see Senator Cotton? He usually stands at the border of Arkansas with a sign saying hello. Did you see him when you came in?
No, but there were some guys standing there with shotguns. But
well, that could have been Tom. That could have been the senator. Anyway, so it does look normal out there, doesn't it?
Yes, life seems to be returning to some normality. Now, some of the smaller antique shops that we did stop at were requiring the shoppers to wear masks. The restaurants seem to be, and we only stopped at a few roadside restaurants, seem to be observing the social distancing, but they weren't requiring masks, and the dining rooms were about average fill, but as they were before this all started.
Where did you stay, by the way, on your trip? Did you stay at a hotel, a motel?
No, we stayed at a cabin, a friend's cabin up in the Ozarks, up by Greer's Ferry Lake. The Walmart stores were packed, just as they normally are on a holiday weekend. Social distancing was observed at the registers, but not so much in the aisles where people were shopping.
You see, the one thing I'm waiting to see, when I was in Northern Virginia, there was only one hotel that I saw that was open with a desk clerk and the door was open. So I don't think that the travel, you're rare, I think, for having gone out of town, but I think people are moving around, and certainly the number of TSA visits skyrocketed this week. Hey, thank you, my friend. I'm glad to hear that you were out and about and that they're guarding the Arkansas line, because that's important. I did note that mortgage credit is tightening, creating a drag on the economic recovery, according to the Wall Street Journal. With interest rates falling to the lowest level on record, this should be a banner time for households in search of a new mortgage. It isn't. Mortgage availability has tightened sharply as lenders impose tougher income, credit scores, and down payment conditions, drop some loan types altogether. You know, that's not what Andrew and Todd.com are telling me. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172, and I talk to them, often. They are doing box office business. So I wonder, it just doesn't seem to me to be consistent with what I'm hearing from them. So I'm sure the Journal talked to some people. I'm not sure all mortgage lenders want to lend right now because the rates are so low. But Andrew and Todd.com are lining people up and getting them closed, and people are buying houses. In fact, you can't really find a house in Northern Virginia because of the Amazon effect. So that's back being where it was. I just think, except for Hong Kong, the world is feeling pretty good. Hong Kong, by contrast, not so good. Hong Kong in shock as China's Xi Jinping goes for nuclear option. Again, it's the Wall Street Journal. With his plan to impose sweeping anti-sedition legislation on Hong Kong, Chinese leader Xi Jinping has revealed a willingness to alter the one-time British colony's special status as a self-governing city with a speed and a scope that surprised many, from pro-democracy activists to diplomats to business people. Next hour, I will play for you the appearance of Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, frequent guest on this show, old-time friend, on Chuck Todd's Meet the Press this Sunday, where they talked about the consequences of this. If they crack down, if they impose martial law, as appears to be happening this week or next in Hong Kong, that will be the end of Hong Kong as a banking center. Capital will flee. It just will flee. When we come back, an update on the General Flynn case. The Washington Post has an op-ed by Judge Michael Luttig, retired from the federal judge, probably the most influential federal judge in the United States who's retired. What the appeals court should and shouldn't do in the Flynn case. And this Luttig piece is going to rock D.C. and the bench. I'll bring you that, plus my own column on U.S. cybersecurity. There's a lot to talk about this morning, but isn't it great to know that summer has sprung and it sorta is normal? Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
On a personal level, Mr. Secretary, not as Secretary of State, do you believe that the Communist Chinese Party has told us the truth on any significant issue in the last 3 months?
Well, I'm sure there have been things they've accurately described to us, but it's pretty clear at this point that the Chinese Communist Party is one of its central challenges in any institution that is authoritarian is the absence of the ability for information to flow freely. You saw this, Hugh, in the weeks before this. They decided to kick out U.S. journalists from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You saw what happened when doctors raised their hand and said, hey, I think we have a problem. I think we potentially have a human-to-human virus, and it's spread. And they suppressed that by coercion and worse. Those are the kind of things that authoritarian regimes do. It's the nature of those regimes. And as a result of that, the information didn't get to the right places. And so for days and weeks, the world didn't know what was confronting it. And in a virus like this, those first hours and days and weeks are the most critical in stopping the spread. And the Chinese Communist Party failed to do that properly. I'll say this too, Hugh. We still need transparency today. We need openness today. We are still in the middle of this. We still don't know the precise source and origin spot of the virus. That will turn out to be important for epidemiologists and experts to help us get to the backside of this. We still need that kind of openness, and we urge every country that has information about the virus and data sets and is working on a vaccine or therapeutics to share that information broadly in the scientific community.
Welcome back. We aren't stuck in the virtual Lodi anymore. I think the country is reopening. Good morning. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Tuesday. You know, technically not the first day of summer, but really, isn't it the first day of summer? We're going to have to play the summer wind. I'll tell you when to do that. Probably at the end of the second hour. Yeah, I'm open. Probably at 7:51. I'll do my summer wind annual tribute to summer. This is a Washington Post column by J. Michael Luttig. Judge Luttig served as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit from 1991 to 2006, widely regarded as the runner-up to Chief Justice Roberts to becoming Chief Justice of the United States. He retired, became general counsel of Boeing, retired from Boeing after many years of service last year, is kind of the most influential judge not on the bench. And he wrote about General Flynn yesterday. It's up at thewashingtonpost.com. which you've got to hear in case you don't pay for the paywall. The politically charged issue of whether a federal judge should grant the government's request to dismiss the prosecution against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has brought out the partisan mobs on all sides of the issues, writes Judge Luttig. Fortunately for our country, the issue will be decided not by the rule of mobs, but by the rule of law. The rule of law instructs the U.S. District Court Judge Emmett G. Sullivan has the power, indeed the obligation, to determine whether dismissal of Flynn's case would be in the public interest and whether the integrity of the judicial process would be compromised by granting the government's dismissal request. This authority stems from the federal criminal rules of procedure and the trial judge's inherent authority. If this authority were properly exercised, the judge's refusal to dismiss the case would not impermissibly usurp the executive's exclusive constitutional power to decide whether to bring or maintain a criminal prosecution. That's a little bit of a stunner right at the beginning, but then he goes on. The devil is in the word properly. In Flynn's case, the judge has already abused his wide discretion by inviting outside advocates to weigh in, which would make the circus of the solemn judicial proceeding, and by selecting an outside party to make the case against dismissal, who has already made clear his bias against dismissal via this very newspaper, the Washington Post. Judge Luttig continues, in response, Flynn's lawyers have taken the unusual step of asking the federal appeals court to order Sullivan to dismiss the case, arguing that prosecutors have the sole power to decide whether to continue the prosecution. Ordinarily, this effort would fail. However, this is not the ordinary case, continues Judge Luttig. It is a highly extraordinary case, and the appeals court should step in, even at this early stage, not to order that the case be dismissed, bit of a surprise there, but to send it back to a different trial court for further review. The Court of Appeals is bound to permit and require a trial court to decide in the first instance these questions that are now before the court. Ordering the trial judge to dismiss at this stage would be premature. The federal rules of criminal procedure allow the government to dismiss an indictment only with leave of the court. Those words contemplate that the trial judge has a constitutionally important role to play in whether a prosecution is dismissed. If the Court of Appeals were to order Sullivan to dismiss the case now, the full appeals court, or if not, the Supreme Court, should reverse that error. The appeals court, though, would be justified in intervening in the case now to correct the process the judge has established for moving to decision. Sullivan has done two highly unusual and troubling things. First, he invited amici, or outside friends of the court, to submit arguments on whether dismissal of the prosecution would be in the public interest. These are questions for the judge to decide, not for the public to debate. Second, and more disturbing, he tasked a retired federal judge, John Gleeson, with making the case that Flynn's guilty plea should not be dismissed. Bringing in an outside party, in essence, to argue for the continued prosecution of the case is unusual enough, but Gleeson, though a well-respected former judge, is the wrong choice. In an op-ed in which he all but argued that Sullivan should not grant his motion to dismiss, he revealed his bias on the very question in which his impartial advice is sought. The Court of Appeals should therefore proceed as follows. Grant the writ of mandamus, disallow amicus briefs, have the judge select a different advisor to assist him confidentially if necessary, and the Court of Appeal agrees, and urge that the judge rule promptly on the motion to dismiss, explaining his reasons for full appellate review. I'll finish this on the other side. Bottom line, Judge Sullivan is way out of line. Way out of line. Judge Luttig recognizes it. And I urge you to send everyone you know Judge Luttig's Washington Post op-ed as soon as you can. Coming up after break, Mike Allen. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. A chilling headline ran over Easter weekend from CNN. Louisville police officers to record license plate numbers of Easter weekend churchgoers. Over the course of this pandemic, I've argued that churches should follow generally applicable shelter-in-place orders, that these orders and guidelines do not violate religious liberty. Indeed, we ought to comply with them out of love of neighbor. But if policies single out churches and religious groups, it becomes an entirely different issue, an unconstitutional violation of religious liberty. Over the course of the last several weeks, some government officials have crossed the line. In the case of Louisville, it took a restraining order from United States District Court Judge Justin Walker to curtail Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher's attempt to prevent even drive-in church gatherings. The judge said, quote, "The mayor's decision is stunning, and it is beyond all reason unconstitutional. Consider this. In America, in 2020, comes the threat that they're taking names and they're taking numbers. It's extremely important that all American Christians take note, and in a hurry." I'm Albert Mohler.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, America. Millions of Americans said that this weekend, and they were out and about social distancing, but they were out again, and it seems to me that summer has sprung. Unfortunately, there's a shadow over summer in the form of the crackdown in Hong Kong, but luckily, Mike Allen is with us. Good morning, Mike Allen from Axios AM. How are you, my friend?
Well, good morning, and I know that it's the day after Memorial Day because I just saw in Morning Joe Jonathan Swan wearing a summer jacket.
Oh,
and
there you go.
It reminded me that one of those traditions that is totally changed our world. Who cares what kind of shoes you're wearing these days? But it is summer, and it's a treat to be talking to you, Hugh.
Well, thank you. It is summer, and I always do my, after this coming back, I'll do my Summer Win annual reminder of why we love summer. But Mike Allen, I noticed this weekend, we're both inside the Beltway, that, and I was out with a senior administration official last night, socially distant, mask wearing, wandering around Northern Virginia. The crowds are out. People are out. The restaurants are open on the sidewalk. Drinks are being served. The police have relaxed public drinking rules completely because they understand the situation. I sense a real itch for people to be together this summer. Did you see the same thing?
Absolutely. 3 data points. One, yes, maybe inside the Beltway geographically, hopefully not psychically, but yes, I was out and about yesterday, including on the Mount Vernon Trail, and D.C. was very much out yesterday. There were even boats yesterday. So
yes,
the marinas around D.C. are open. The rental places aren't, so you can't rent a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard, but there were a fair number of boats out. But that's just color. Here's what really matters. The lead story of today's Wall Street Journal. Economy displays nascent signs of activity. And this story, when it popped up last night, just stunned me. And this is a very significant milestone. And I made it the number 2 story in Axios AM, Mike's Top 10. The economy may be past the trough in terms of peak damage. Such resonant and such significant phrasing. And what the journal says is that whether you're looking at truck freight, whether you're looking at hotel bookings, some air travel, listen to this, mortgage applications rising, more people applying to open new businesses. And so, as the journal says, these are the early signs the U.S. economy is ever so slowly creeping back to life. Now, Hugh, the ultimate asterisk, pain to come, pain continuing to exist. You heard Kevin Hassett, senior White House economic advisor, telling Dana Bash yesterday on CNN State of the Union that Sunday, telling her that unemployment in May could be around 20%, could still be double digits on Election Day in November. So lots of pain for the country. I look at the small businesses in my neighborhood as I walk around Georgetown, as I walk from Roslyn, where I live, down to Clarendon, where Axios' empty office is. Those small businesses all still struggling. Like so many of them, they're offering takeout. You can tell the owner, chef, proprietor is doing all the work themselves, and there's not that much business. So very mixed picture on people coming out, but starting to be signs of summer.
Yeah, and what I liked about Axios this morning is you used the little emblematic mood ring about breaking news. Dow futures jumped more than 200 points on the hopes of the coronavirus vaccine. I think the mood ring has gone definitely green, open, and the TSA, the number of TSA checks as people go into airports has lifted off. Not, it's still down 80% year over year, but it was down 100% year over year as of 4 weeks ago. So people are beginning to cautiously return to airports, and that means, and of course, you have the Pix du jour, no law when you're drinking the claw of the Ozarks beach party. But I notice, and I think this is the key thing, Mike, this is Hugh Hewitt's intuition, that if you look at the provisional COVID-19 death data from the CDC, and it's always 2 weeks behind, so this is 2 weeks old data, but I'm looking at it from the CDC site. As of May 16th in the United States, the total number of COVID deaths for people under the age of 25 was under 100. And above 85 years old, 22,000, 75 years old, 18,000, 65 years old, 14,000, 55 years old, 8,000, 45 years old, 3,300, 44 years old, 1,100. People have intuited this is a disease for the old and the medically fragile. They know they can carry it. They'll be very careful when they go around older people, but they're going to reopen. You just can't keep Americans out of public spaces and from having fun in the summer.
One more data point for you, Hugh. Dallas County, Texas, includes Dallas, population 3.5 million, so it could be a state, of course. And listen to this. They say that they have had, this is a headline in the Dallas Morning News, good news with quotes around good news. Good news trend continues in Dallas County. 178 new coronavirus cases, one fatality. And the fatality was a woman in her 70s who lived at a long-term care facility. More than a third of Dallas's 211 deaths have been people associated with long-term care facilities.
That is going to be going forward the most difficult public health challenge is how to make it easier to live well and long and strong in a retirement community to be safe from the virus. Let me turn, Mike, to the other major story of the weekend. Robert C. O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, was on with Chuck Todd and Margaret Brennan. But with Chuck Todd, he talked at length about Hong Kong, and it appears that President Trump, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor O'Brien, Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin, they will all jointly crack down verbally, followed by sanctions, and they expect the banking sector to withdraw from Hong Kong rapidly. The money flows to stop if General Secretary Xi goes forward with the crackdown. I mean, they're adamant, and it doesn't seem to me anyway for Xi to do other than crack down, given the national security law that the Politburo passed. What's your assessment of the future of Hong Kong? Mine is it's a very dark future.
Yeah, no question. And these changes by China, people knew they were coming, but the abruptness of it was surprising. The timing and the approach of it. And Robert O'Brien yesterday telling Chuck Todd on the Meet the Press appearance that you were referring to, he says, I'm not sure how the financial community can stay in a Hong Kong that's dominated by the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party. And he says there was a capital system there. There was democracy, local legislative officials, local legislative elections. If those things go away, I'm not sure how the financial community can stay. And I think you're going to have a terrible brain drain.
Yep. He expanded on that later, suggesting that China had overreached. They had not calculated the international blowback that will come, and that Hong Kong will see its best and brightest flee to the United Kingdom, which is already preparing them passports pursuant to the 1997 deal and the 1987 treaty that preceded it. Let me play for you before I go. This happened right after I went off the air on Friday for the long weekend. Yesterday we had our Semper Fi Fun show, so I didn't play this, but this is Vice President Biden with his famous exchange with Charlemagne the God. Cut number 2, please.
Thanks so much. That's really our time. I apologize.
You can't do that to black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community.
Thanks so much.
So, Mike Allen, the unfortunate extension of the interview, which Joe Biden shouldn't have agreed to, and which Charlemagne the God did what I always do, which is take people long, and they know that's going to go long, so you leave a little buffer there. The staffer broke in. I don't think this goes away. I think this leaves a mark. I also think it means that the vice president has to select an African-American for the ticket. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, two things. One, you saw the vice president said that he shouldn't have been a wise guy and apologized. But secondly, you saw that's nice that you think that about the vice presidential ticket. And Hugh, your influence is long and loud, but your influence over the Democratic vice presidential ticket might be limited. But Charlemagne the God on CNN said that after that comment, Vice President Biden is committed to it being a woman. He said that it being an African American even more important.
Now, I from the beginning of this race, since Central Park debating Van Jones 2.5 years ago, I said Kamala Harris would be on this ticket one way or the other. Of course, my prediction rankings in the Washington Post were last among all the pundits because I thought Kamala would be the nominee. If you look around all of the would-be vice presidents, I think she's conducted herself very well in the course of the Veep Stakes, which is a quiet little competition. Amy Klobuchar has an entry in the Post today. She struggles to get back into the hunt. What do you make of the way that Senator Harris has conducted the non-campaign campaign?
Well, she's done a great job, and you've seen a number of the senators will be in the mix. There's governors will be in the mix. And here's a twist, Hugh. There's an AP story this morning pointing out the two of the people at the top of the short list at the top of the medium list, are both in Atlanta. Both the mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and Stacey Abrams, both in Atlanta. So a little Southern flavor from a state that, as you know, had been super duper Republican, now moving Democrat, is going to be increasingly a swing state, increasingly a target for Democrats, and ultimately, based on immigration patterns, probably could go blue, right?
There is only one downside to Senator Harris, Mike, which is that if, in fact, for whatever reason, Vice President Biden were to stumble and not become the nominee, even at this late date, something happens health-wise or politically-wise, if you've named Kamala Harris as your vice president, you can't put the strongest top person on top of the ticket, which would be Gavin Newsom, who has, I think, and I just want 20 seconds of your opinion of Gavin Newsom, I think he has won the shutdown in terms of political figures in America. Andrew Cuomo was in the lead, but he blew it with the retirement home policy. I think Gavin Newsom has won the shutdown. Mike Allen, to you, last 15 seconds.
Gavin Newsom has a great future. We saw this when he mixed it up with Jim Vandehei on Axios on HBO. Jim said this is the least talking point interview that I've had. And what does that show you, Hugh? That shows he is comfortable in his own skin. Listen to David Axelrod. He says that's the number one determiner of who's going to be president.
Interesting. Mike Allen, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Allen. Get Axios in your mailbox every morning. Thank you, Mike. And get ReliefFactor.com in your system every day. I took this to my daughter-in-law this weekend, socially distant, of course, because her back is killing her. And so I said, here, have a bag of my Relief Factor. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I take it every morning. I don't have any lukewarm coffee. It's absolutely gone. I have to refill during the break. So I've got my Kirkland Italian sparkling mineral water. How in the world is this Italian? I have no idea how this is Italian, but I do know that this is ReliefFactor.com. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Makes it possible to have a great summer. David Drucker's coming up next. Stay tuned.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This nation that we live in right now is under attack. The values upon which it was built have been systematically sabotaged for decades. But in the last 8 years of the Obama administration, that desire to dismantle what we represent was shared by those in the highest office of the land.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Thanks so much. That's really our time. I apologize.
You can't do that to black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with
You
the
ain't
fact
black, Charlemagne the God. That was a stunner. It happened Friday just as I got off the air. David Drucker joins me now from the Washington Examiner. Follow David on Twitter at David M. Drucker. Read everything he writes at thewashingtonexaminer.com or dcexaminer.com. David, how long will the "you ain't black" comment trail the vice president?
Hugh, it's a really good question. Obviously, it was problematic. So much so that for the first time since I can remember during this campaign, going back into last year, the vice president's campaign moved rather quickly to clean it up. And we had seen with some previous gaffes and other mistakes that it took them a while. So I think they recognized how problematic it was. So, look, I think it's just going to be a matter of one, how effective the president's pitch to black voters is. They're spending a lot of money and making a huge effort trying to increase their share of the black vote over 2016. And then, the other part of it is the comment isn't good, but unlike Hillary Clinton, Biden has a lot more goodwill with a lot of Democratic voters and voters generally than she did. And so he's a little bit more equipped to weather a storm. But I think we're just going to have to see how this unfolds.
What did you make of the look at the Memorial Day commemoration yesterday with the black mask holding Mrs. Dr. Biden's hand? That's the first time Joe's come out of the basement in months. And it's just an odd look.
I don't actually think there's much of a problem with the look. At the end of the day, I think voters will forgive either candidate for wearing masks, for not wearing masks. There's been so much arguing. Trump went here, he didn't wear a mask. Joe Biden emerges, and I think he picked a good time, a good excuse to emerge. He does wear a mask. I think voters are going to put all of that stuff aside. I think that's more of sort of Twitter cultural bickering.
I don't think I'm not talking about the mask. I'm talking about that he came up out of the basement, walked along a memorial, did not take questions from the press, does not engage with the press except from his basement, and every time he engages with the press, he has a gaffe. In other words, President Trump, who has his helicopter chatter, I mean, he did 4 or 5 different avails yesterday. Contrast that with Vice President Biden, and people are wondering whether Vice President Biden has the energy for this campaign, David. It's on everyone's, they may not talk about it on air, but everybody is talking about it.
Yes, and I think that, over time that's going to be an issue, but I'm just not convinced it's going to be the issue. I just think it's one of those things that gets talked about a lot, but I think the electorate is so polarized. The electorate is so opinionated. Everybody knows where they stand when it comes to President Trump. That I think in some ways, this race isn't going to be about Biden. I think it's going to be about how they feel about Trump, how they feel about his management of the pandemic and his management of any sort of economic comeback. And
I think you're right. Exactly 100%. If we're looking in August and things are getting rosier and accelerating, and then in September the acceleration continues, I think Trump wins. And if we're in a trough or a second season of pandemic, he doesn't. I just think it's the economy, stupid. James Carville was right then. I think he's right now. And the people who hate Trump on Twitter have always hated him and will never, ever vote for him. And the people that don't care about Twitter don't care that he's after Joe Scarborough. They just don't care. They care about their jobs or their money or their bank account.
Well, that's always going to be the overriding factor. And look, I think, in some ways, the challenge for the president is that in 2016, he was this different kind of candidate, and people, no matter how he acted or what he said, were able to put their own spin in their own mind about what it meant. It's an act. It's not an act. He's doing it to get elected. He'll change. He won't change, and I'm glad he won't change. They're going to have, nearly 4 years of presidency to make up their mind and put it against conditions on the ground. And in some ways that could work for him. In some ways that could work against him. And, Biden's job is just to be credible and be an acceptable alternative, and then hope that he can make a case for change.
Just to be credible is everything.
A credible alternative, and people are, tired of the entertainment.
That question is just to be credible. There is a minimum standard on credibility when it comes to energy and campaigning, though, David, isn't there? Doesn't he have to get out?
Yes and no. I think it usually goes without saying that you want to see a candidate who is out there because it tells you that they want it. But I do think it's possible that voters will say these times are not usual, and therefore we understand why this might be different. And by the way, it's the same argument in some ways you could have made about Trump in 2016, that you can't talk a certain way and you have to present yourself a certain way. But voters were looking at things differently, and it enabled him to excel.
Well, David Drucker, we'll check in again next week. I think the question is now firmly lodged in people's minds about the vice president's energy capacity to run this campaign, and that he has to answer it not just once or twice, but every single day. Trump's obviously got the energy. People that way too much energy. I'll be right back, America. David M. Drucker. Follow him on Twitter. Follow me to hour number 2 of this Tuesday, May the 26th in the year of the plague 2020 edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the
Thanks so much. That's really our time. I apologize.
You can't do that to black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do.
You ain't black. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. If you're listening on my YouTube channel at hughhewitt.com or any of my 400 affiliates, good Tuesday morning to you. Joined now by Byron York of the Washington Examiner. Follow him at Byron York on Twitter, at dcexaminer.com on Fox News. Byron, this happened just as I went off the air on Friday. And, of course, yesterday was my Semper Fi and America's Fun show from Memorial Day, so I haven't commented on it yet. It was an extraordinary moment. I don't think it's easily erased, though the media allies of the vice president will try and erase it. What do you think?
Well, there's been a long debate, apart from Joe Biden, about whether the Democratic Party takes black votes for granted. And this fits into that, and it was an example of Joe Biden doing precisely that. I think it's going to really play out in his choice of a vice president. Remember, the Democratic Party has not nominated a white man for president since John Kerry in 2004. So they're doing it again with Joe Biden, which has increased calls for him to choose a woman or a minority or both to be his vice presidential candidate. And so he was under pressure to do that before this gaffe. And I think he's going to be under a lot more pressure to choose a woman of color here. There's obviously talk of Kamala Harris, Val Demings, Stacey Abrams, perhaps others. So I think that this puts him in a box and makes it difficult to choose a vice presidential candidate.
Now, Byron, I think the obvious choice is Senator Harris because Val Demings is a congresswoman with very little national profile, even with the impeachment. Stacey Abrams hasn't won a statewide race and has been trying too hard to get selected. And Kamala Harris is a very accomplished candidate and public figure. There is one drawback, and it's the conversation everyone's having, but not on the air. Does the vice president actually emerge as the nominee? Does he have the energy and the capacity to do it? He's done nothing except the basement interviews, the basement tapes, to grab an old rock and roll term for so long that when he showed up yesterday at the Memorial Day celebration, appropriately garbed and appropriately solemn, but nevertheless not engaging in the media, I think it grew. And if he can't get through a conversation with Charlemagne the God without a major gap, I don't know how he ever gets through a real media season. And this question, you tell me if it's not been in your conversation. In every circle I have is, does he have the ability to make it? And the question comes up again and again and again. Have you heard it discussed off air?
Oh, of course. And that's an issue, although I will say, as far as this particular "you ain't black" gaffe, Joe Biden was perfectly capable of making a gaffe like this when he was much younger, and there were not questions about his stamina or capacity. So I will say that. But apart from that, if Joe Biden is elected, he'll turn 80 around the time of his first midterms. This has never, ever happened in American politics. And it is something, I mean, we've known it for a long time. The calendar is what it is. But it's something I'm not sure national voters have grappled with. So I think you're right. I think Biden is going to have to show them. And you don't show them by jogging across the stage to the microphone. He's going to have to show them day after day that he is sharp and on it and appears to have the stamina for the world to begin the world's most difficult job at age 78, older than Ronald Reagan was when he left the job after 8 years.
Yeah, now by jogging across the stage, I am always reminded when he does that of the dance class at the retirement home, which we've seen caricatured in 1,000 movies, right, where people are doing the Roomba or whatever for exercise and keeping their mobility going. But it's not the look. The stately Barack Obama would jock up on the stage, but people would say that man is a basketball player. That man is an athlete. And Joe Biden doesn't give off that vibe. So I think he's got to do a lot of events, and he's got to sit down with media. Now, the interesting thing about Charlemagne the God exchange, and then I want to move on to Judge Sullivan, is that having made the gap or having gone long, he was very quick in the response to Charlemagne. I mean, he wasn't meandering, he wasn't lost in time and space. He was very quick. So that was the mitigating factor, because the argument is that he's not quick, that he hadn't lost a step, he's lost a lap. I don't think he can do that, Byron, unless he sits with you and on Fox News and with people who are going to press him hard for a long period of time. And when does he have to start to do that?
I don't think he ever has to sit down for tough interviews. I think he will sit down for friendly interviews. And so I would not look at him coming on Fox News, because you're exactly right. It would be a tough interview. It would be a respectful, well-prepared interview. And I think he'd much rather have friendly interviews. He doesn't want to be challenged. He wants to be celebrated.
Byron, I don't think you can hide your way to the presidency. I know that it's a polarized country, but I think even your base begins to worry. If you can't handle an interview, how can you handle the presidency? Trump went everywhere. Of course, we remember 4 years ago, he practically lived on CNN. Didn't Jeff Zucker make Trump president? I mean, Trump made Trump president, but didn't he basically give him the platform on which to become president?
Well, one thing that's extraordinary is the access Trump has given as a candidate and as a president has just been absolutely extraordinary. I mean, when the press was complaining that Trump had basically eliminated the position of White House press secretary for a while, the fact was he was coming out and talking to the press all the time. And I think if you asked White House reporters, okay, here's the deal, you lose the daily briefing, but you talk to the president himself almost daily, they'd say, well, that's pretty good. There's some terrible story in the press. And in the past, a president would hide for a few days. Trump comes out and talks. So you're absolutely right. The contrast in media access will be huge unless Biden does open himself up to the press.
A last note on this. The media, which is so eager to count the number of, quote, lies that he tells, and I think it's a bogus metric, they never count the number of questions he answers compared to the number of questions President Obama answered. I think it's got to be 500% more. It might be 1,000% more. I don't know, but it's so many more than President Obama did. Byron, very quickly, we've covered Judge Sullivan before. Mike Luttig, J. Michael Luttig, retired Fourth Circuit judge, perhaps the most influential retired judge in America, has penned an op-ed in the Washington Post that tells the D.C. Circuit, his former colleagues in essence, what he would do, which in this case would be to send the case down to a different judge. How influential do you think the Luttig op-ed is going to be?
Well, I think it's going to be well read by the judges who make this decision. I mean, basically, Luttig it wasn't just a slam dunk of Judge Sullivan, but it was saying, look, bringing in this whole amicus thing, bringing in like an alternate prosecutor is not a good idea. Don't do that. Hand this thing over to another judge. Now, if you're Michael Flynn, you think, oh, great. You give it to another judge who's going to take months to familiarize himself or herself with the case, and then we're going to have to go through all of this again. I mean, the Michael Flynn people are saying, look, the government dropped the case. That's the end of the story. So Luttig, being a former judge, is going to look at it from that point of view.
He's protecting the judiciary at the same time that he's protecting. He did take a couple of hits at Sullivan that were hard-hitting and calling it a circus to invite in the amici and mob rule, and I agree with all that. But I do think that with that column in front of Judge Rao, especially, a new judge on the D.C. Circuit who clerked on the Fourth Circuit for Judge Wilkerson at the same time that Luttig was an active judge, it's going to be very hard to just slam dunk it home. I was thinking they might just dismiss the case and that the judge would lack standing to ask for en banc review. Now I think there's a way out for them.
Yeah, so what you're saying is this Flynn case could extend even longer, right?
Well, I'm saying it could go to another judge who will act rather rapidly because it is extraordinary that Judge Sullivan did not grant the motion to dismiss. There's no way to have a prosecution from the bench. It just doesn't exist in America. But 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, Byron, and it's torture for the general, but it seems to me that it's inevitable that he will be released soon. Do you agree with that sense that it's inevitable?
I do. I think in by released mean released from this case. He's free.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. I don't think there's any way to prosecute this case that has actually been dropped. And by the way, we still haven't seen some things in this case. We still haven't seen the original 302 in this case, which is the most important document in the whole thing.
Yep. It's the wildest. The crazy people who care about due process should be appalled by what has been done to General Flynn. And I never used to think that, but I've been persuaded in the last 6 months. Byron York on Twitter, on Fox News, at dcexaminer.com. Thank you. Coming right back, America. We'll check those markets, which are as buoyant as the weekend was across the world, except in Hong Kong. Don't go anywhere. I am Hugh Hewitt. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
In Minnesota, I mean, this is an actual factual reporting. The governor of Minnesota will allow 50 people in restaurants, but churches can only have 10. The governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, announced yesterday restaurants can host up to 50 customers in outdoor seatings, but churches will still be limited to 10, even outdoors. Now, again, call me crazy, call me cynical. I'm not quite able to wrap my brain around a church being told you can't have any more than 10 worshipers, even outside in the parking lot, but 50 people dining is A-okay with us in the state of Minnesota. Well, do you know what the Catholic Church is doing in Minnesota? They're saying, go pound salt. The Catholic Church in Minnesota issued a letter yesterday. The Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis announced they will just not be complying with the governor's mandate. The Archdiocese of Minnesota is pointing out, the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, they're pointing out the governor lifted Minnesota's stay-at-home order. But under the order, a maximum of 10 people are allowed within a confined space during worship services. The state's Catholic Church believes services can be held on its own terms as long as they take proper sanitation measures, private social distancing protocols, and 1/3 limited capacity. The letter says, we are blessed to live in a nation that guarantees the free exercise of religion. This right can only be abridged for a compelling governmental interest. That's why a large majority of states now allow in-person religious services. The letter is very explicit. They're
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I hope you are watching me on YouTube. We have the YouTube channel to which you should subscribe if you want the watch live and every morning. Or you can, of course, get the best interviews that we do every single week. Last week, Mark Zuckerberg, Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. Look, if it's news, it happens here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. One of the things that has been happening all month, we are in the last week of our Angel Tree campaign to help the children of prisoners, people in jail, get blessed this summer through our partners at Prison Fellowship. So far, network-wide at Salem, our show and the other Salem Radio Network talk shows have raised over $265,000 to help send Angel Tree care packages to boys and girls with a parent or two in prison. This was a brand new initiative that we created to serve these awesome kids in the midst of the virus panic, as Prison Fellowship President James Ackerman tells us.
We have to plan this year, in worst case scenario, for Angel Tree. So if there's another COVID outbreak, we have to figure out a different way of facilitating Angel Tree. So there's a whole lot of things going on. We're really excited about where we are as a ministry and how God has pivoted us to be relevant at this time. And, we're just honored to be able to serve in the way that God is allowing us to.
But there's only a few days left for you to join in this. Every May we do this. This is a special May because it's a uniquely difficult time to reach these kids. Normally we can send them to camp. Some of the camps will be open, not most of them. But either way, we're not forgetting these kids if you help us. And $265,000 is great to raise, but we could do so much more with your help. Please consider a gift over at HughHewitt.com. Find the Angel Tree banner or call 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. But I always think it's better to go to HughHewitt.com and use the Angel Tree banner there. Let me go to the big story of the day, the market story of the day, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you the money to buy a home, and maybe you are going home shopping now that the reopening is underway and open houses are happening with social distancing and people are moving and trucks are around. The big story of the day, and the 10-year bond, by the way, is at 0.66%, so interest rates are the lowest they've ever been. The biggest story of the day, global stocks rise as reopening optimism takes hold, according to CNN and the Wall Street Journal. Optimism over reopening pushes global stocks higher. These are the same story. Also in the Financial Times, European stocks rise as lockdown easing boosts sentiment. But there's also a Wall Street Journal story that it's difficult to get a mortgage. And I kind of scratched my head because it isn't difficult to get it. It says mortgage credit tightens, creating drag on any economic recovery. Now, look, that was yesterday. And Nick Timmerose and Andrew Ackerman are good reporters of the Wall Street Journal. But they haven't talked to Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian because it is not tightened over at Sierra Pacific. They are doing lots of loans. And this is not a call center. This is not a shuffle the deck on you. They don't sell you loans you don't need. They won't refinance you unless you save real money or cut years off of your loan. If you're a senior and you need to get money out with a reverse mortgage, AndrewandTodd.com, or go to 888-888-1172. In Japan, stocks are up 2.5% overnight. In Hong Kong, even as it looms over them, this new national security law, they were up 2%. England and Germany opened strong today. The United States is going to have a good day as well because everyone saw with their own eyes. They saw with their own eyes. All right, anecdotal evidence is evidence of anecdotes, but you can see a trend. And people were out this weekend all across the United States, and they're not going anywhere. They're staying out. I don't think restaurants are fully open, but I wouldn't be surprised in 2 weeks if they are open everywhere. Gavin Newsom took the restrictions off broadly in California yesterday. I believe you're going to see there's still some restriction in place in some places in the Golden State, but I believe outside of genuine hotspots, it will now be the exception, not the rule, that America is locked down. And I think you're going to see people travel by car a lot. I just sensed it. And, I trust my own eyes. I don't trust people who are telling me terrible things. I think people have intuited that if they're in good shape, they are not at risk, and they know better than to go near people who are, and that we will keep in place restrictions around old people who are fragile and the medically fragile, and we will look for them to take care of themselves and their caregivers. But I think the rest of the country and the world is figuring it out, how to do economic freedom in the age of the virus, and that's a very good thing. AndrewandTodd.com. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Young people today, not even young, I would say even under 40, do not know what America was like when it was truly free. It's an early memory. There was a lightness. That's what it is. There was a lightness to American life. Today it is heavy.
Yeah, I had put a tweet out, I think about a day ago, that's gotten, 1.4 million looks on it. It was a tweet. It said, somebody's told me Gavin Newsom says California won't get back to normal until we find a vaccine. And I wrote, California hasn't been normal.
More children died in their bathtub than from the virus. And you can't go to work in Pennsylvania.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Listen to this one from the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. On the USS Theodore Roosevelt, 1,102 sailors were infected. That's a lot. That's a lot. How many you think died? These are not children. Do you know the answer? Or because if you don't know, I want you to guess. 1,102 sailors were infected. How many needed to go to a hospital and how many died? Sean, guess. 1,100 on a ship. So they really got it, man. They really got it. 100 went to the hospital, 2 died is Triple G's response. Living martyr? Yeah. Same? 50 hospital, 2. And 2 died. Yeah. Answer, 7 hospital, 1 died. Wow! We are living through hysteria, and most Americans are at peace with tyranny.
Welcome back, American. Hugh Hewitt. Thanks so much for joining me on the first day of summer. People ask me, why do I support Donald Trump? It's because I support the president's policies. And I do not believe we can afford as a country that wishes to survive as a republic, a free republic, and thrive as a free republic for another generation, 2, 5, however long, if we appease the Chinese Communist Party. And I believe Joe Biden means appeasement, just like President Obama meant appeasement, not just of China, but of Iran and of Russia and of all of the adversaries of the United States, but most importantly, China. This point of view was given full throat by Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor to President Trump. He was on Meet the Press and Face the Nation on Sunday, and Robert, of course, has been on the show for years. He's an old and dear friend of mine. We used to be law partners. I'm retired from the private practice of law now. And Robert is too, because he's in the White House with President Trump. But he went on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, who's, of course, also a weekly guest. And they had one of the more substantive discussions about national security that I have heard in a long, long time. I want you to hear it. Here is Robert O'Brien on Meet the Press on Sunday. I'm not hearing it.
Welcome back. A new round of demonstrations broke out in Hong Kong earlier today. The crowds are protesting the Chinese government's announcement of new security laws that would sharply curtail freedom in the territory and bring Hong Kong even further under Beijing's control. Many fear the move will end what has been known as one country, two systems form of government that has existed since the United Kingdom surrendered control of Hong Kong back in 1997. So joining me now is the President's National Security Advisor, Ambassador Robert O'Brien. Ambassador O'Brien, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thanks, Chuck. Great to be with you as always.
Let me start with the Hong Kong issue. What is the United States government prepared to do if Beijing goes through with basically this crackdown on Hong Kong and moves Hong Kong away from an open marketplace and an open democracy?
Well, as you know, Chuck, the Communist Party of China promised Great Britain back in 1984 with the Sino-British Declaration that Hong Kong would have a degree of autonomy and would be maintain their way of life through 2047. So now 27 years before that deadline, it looks like with this national security law, they're going to basically take over Hong Kong. And if they do, under the 1992 Hong Kong Policy Act and the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act of 2019, Secretary Pompeo would likely be unable to certify that Hong Kong maintains a high degree of autonomy. And if that happens, there will be sanctions that will be imposed on Hong Kong and China. It's hard to see how Hong Kong could remain the Asian financial center that it's become if China takes over.
And do you want that to be the response? If China does this, do you hope that the financial services community, that global corporations pull out of Hong Kong immediately?
I just don't see how they can stay. One reason that they came to Hong Kong is because there was the rule of law there. There was a free enterprise system. There was a capitalist system. There was democracy and local legislative elections. If all those things go away, I'm not sure how the financial community can stay there. And I think you're also going to have a terrible brain drain. I think Hong Kong citizens, many of whom can travel under certain circumstances, could travel to the United Kingdom or seek refuge other places. They're not going to stay in Hong Kong to be dominated by the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party. So I think if China goes through and imposes this law, which I think would be a big mistake, I think it's going to be very difficult for the people of Hong Kong.
Do you really think China is going to be nervous about sanctions and that's going to stop them at this point? It seems as if he's so nervous about the demonstrations. Is a threat of sanctions enough to get China to pull back?
Well, I think what we can all be proud of are the people of Hong Kong who have taken to the streets to show all of us who enjoy democracy and the rule of law in our countries how precious that is. And they're out in the streets this weekend demonstrating that they want to be free people, that they want to elect their own leaders and have the right to worship as they see fit and earn a living the way they see fit. So, look, China is dependent on capital from the rest of the world. To build their economy and grow their middle class, they're dependent on liquidity and financial markets. If they lose access to that through Hong Kong, that's a real blow to Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. So I hope they'll take that into account as they contemplate their next step.
You know, over the last 6 months when these demonstrations began, the president was in negotiations on a big trade agreement with Xi and China. And during that time, he himself never really got tough, never stood up in support of the demonstrators. Others in the administration did, but he was careful, and a lot of reporting said he didn't want to upset the trade deal. Did that turn out to be a mistake?
No, I don't think it was a mistake. We want good relations with China and with the Chinese people, but unfortunately we're seeing just action after action by the Chinese Communist Party that makes it difficult. And with respect to the trade deal, we'll see if they live up to it. But we're dealing in a new world now with Corona. They unleashed a virus on the world that's destroyed trillions of dollars in American economic wealth that we're having to spend to keep our economy alive, to keep Americans afloat during this virus. So we're in a very different world. The cover-up that they did of the virus is going to go down in history along with Chernobyl. We'll see an HBO special about it 10 or 15 years from now. And so we're in a different place with China as we speak today, Chuck.
Well, I understand that, but it's interesting you bring that up because I want to put together at the for the first 3 months of this year when this virus first poked its head up, the president was pretty soft when it came to pinning the blame on China. Take a listen, Ambassador.
You trust that we're going to know everything we need to know from China?
I do. I have a great relationship with President Xi.
President Xi loves the people of China. He loves his country, and he's doing a very good job with a very, very tough situation.
Our relationship with China is very good. Maybe it's closer because of what's happened here. It came out of China, and it's one of those things that happen. It's nobody's fault.
Now, that last quote was from March 14th, and the president's rhetoric has changed since then. There's no doubt. But are you concerned that that sort of soft relationship with Xi, publicly praising him all the time, gave Xi comfort that he could do these things in Hong Kong without a lot of other than rhetorical retribution?
No, I don't think so. And I think the thing we have to focus on with the virus and what the president did is for the first time in the Oval Office briefing on the 28th of January, when I raised with the president that this was a significant national security threat, he immediately, against the advice of many of his other advisors, he immediately imposed a travel ban on China on the 30th. 2 days later, it was profile and courage, and it was something that he was criticized for by his political opponents and by many in the media. That saved countless lives. I think that's the thing that we have to focus on with China. Now, we were hoping that China would allow CDC doctors into China. We were hoping that China would give us more information on the virus and give us some of the genetic information we needed. Unfortunately, China did none of that. And so, look, we're in a very different place with China right now, and the president's made that clear. But, the Chinese didn't do what they said. We've also learned that at the time that they cracked down internally and refused to allow people from Hubei and Wuhan to travel throughout China, they allowed those folks to travel to Europe. And a large part of the infection that came to America didn't come from China. It was when we closed off China, and I asked my fellow NSAs in European countries to cut off travel. They didn't, and the virus spread to Europe and then back to the U.S. China should have cut off all the travel out of Hubei and Wuhan like they did internally in China. So we've learned a lot of things, and it's disconcerting. But we'll move forward. We'll defeat this thing going forward, and America will come out stronger.
Should the public be reassured or concerned about this relationship with China when it comes to the vaccine? So, for instance, if China has a vaccine first and our relations are as heated as they appear to be right now, is it possible the world doesn't see that vaccine, we don't see that vaccine, or would you trust a vaccine out of China?
Well, we're going to get to the vaccine first. We're doing tremendous work on therapies and vaccines, and once we get them, we'll share them not only with America, but we'll share them with the world. One of the things it won't do, though, is it won't bring back the 90-plus thousand Americans, grandparents, parents, frontline healthcare workers, first responders who've died as a result of this virus. And we mourn with their families. Our heart goes out to them. The president mourns with them and grieves with them. And we're thinking of them. So we'll get this virus under control. We'll have vaccines. We'll have therapeutics. We're moving rapidly using American innovation. We're going to stop the Chinese from hacking into our universities to steal that information. And we're going to get the vaccine, and we're going to get out to the whole world. And I think America is going to come out on top on this one, Chuck.
Very quickly on the mask debate. It seems that the president is the one debating. I know one of your deputies is a big proponent of wearing a mask. Are you concerned that an example isn't being set by the president?
Chuck, this is my mask that I wear at the office every day. I'm not wearing it here because the cameraman's 6 feet away from me and you're in the studio. So so we're safe. I'll put it on when we leave. But we wear the mask in the White House, and the president's wore a mask where necessary. He did so at the Ford plant. But when the president's out speaking to the American people, or when he's speaking, and if we meet with him in the Oval Office, our seats are always moved 6 feet or so away from the Resolute desk. Then there are times when you don't need to wear the mask. But I think Governor DeWine was spot on when he talked about office workers wearing the mask, and mask usage is going to help us get this economy reopened. And we do need to get the country reopened, because we can't get left behind by China or others with respect to our economy. But look, I'm a proponent of masks. Matt Pottinger, who you referenced before, is a proponent of masks, and many, many people in the White House are wearing them, and the West Wing are wearing them. And we hope that's an example for other folks that when they go back to work, that they'll wear masks at their offices as well.
Ambassador O'Brien, I appreciate you coming on, sharing the administration's
views. So that was,
views.
I thought, first of all, it's tough. A lot of people say Chuck is tough on everybody. Well, look, that was a tough question about what the president said in March. The answer is jaw is better than war. That is, by the way, not a Churchill quote. It's Harold Macmillan. Churchill actually said jaw and war. Jaw is better than war. It's not Winston Churchill. It's Harold Macmillan. Churchill actually said meeting jaw to jaw is better than war, but Harold Macmillan said the famous jaw is better than war. So when the president praises Xi and tries to get him to cooperate through mid-March, that's good diplomacy. And then becoming realistic about China that they are not going to change is good presidency. And that's what Robert O'Brien made clear yesterday. Trump's done it right. We're not going to appease China. We are now out in the open with our obvious disappointment. They've killed millions of people. I know the death count isn't 1 million yet, but I believe it really is over across the world. I really do believe that China will end up killing millions of people because of the way they conducted themselves in October, November, and December. And that is on President Xi, and he doesn't care. He's an atheist, and he doesn't care, and they're communists, and they don't care. But we care, and the president cares, and we can't go back to appeasement. We cannot elect Joe Biden and go back to appeasement because the Chinese communists are not changing. We have to change. President Trump is doing that. And I thought Robert O'Brien articulated that very, very well. So I played for you the entire exchange. But it ought to also, to the people who are mad at me when I have Chuck on, he's a very tough interviewer, but that allows the prepared people in the world to shine like O'Brien did. If you're good, you don't mind tough questions. You better have answers to them. O'Brien, the president, do. Hey, look, it's ReliefFactor.com time. There is the bag. I took a bag to my daughter-in-law yesterday because she has got chronic back problems of the sort that go with being an athlete for your whole life. And she had mentioned it to me. We were socially distanced gathered on Friday, and she said, my back is acting up. And I said, never fear, Relief Factor is here. And I came into my precious supply, which is safe here, away from Eskimo Pie Eye's sticky fingers, and we know who she is, and we know what she does. She comes in the studio and grabs the Relief Factor and the Chuck Box books. But I've got him in the East Coast studio, and ReliefFactor.com. We'll see if it works for her. It works for me. I'll be out on the trundling paths of the Beltway as soon as the show is over this morning. Beautiful day inside of the Beltway. Summer has sprung, as we will talk about in the next segment. But I'll tell you, if you haven't given it a try yet, please do. And thanks to all of you who signed up yesterday during the Semper Fi and America's Fun Show for HonorBoundCoffee.com. You're supporting the military families of America every day that you subscribe to HonorBoundCoffee.com. Please go and do so right now and come right back.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. Come on. Take a look at the record.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Anyway, thanks. I will come back.
All right.
I look forward to seeing you in person.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay, pal. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Charlamagne. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Notice Charlamagne had absolutely no problem with that. Either he didn't really hear it, or he didn't appreciate how he was being insulted, or he agrees with it. Either way, it's bad. If you have a problem figuring out where you want me or Trump, then you ain't black. Trump's black support is probably at least twice what it was in 2016, which means Joe Biden is asserting that there are millions of black people who are going to vote for Donald Trump who aren't really black.
Oh, I'm in trouble.
Of course, this is how he rolls, isn't it?
You know, you felt it yesterday, America. You saw it all weekend long. You felt it. You said, summer's back. It was a harsh spring. The harshest since that terrible year of 9/11. But the summer is back. I know it doesn't begin until June 20th, but it really began this weekend. Some of you got in that car. The most blessed of you pulled out on the Pacific Coast Highway a little south of Long Beach. Started heading south down through Surf City, past Ruby's on the Pier, down through Newport Beach, past the Crab Shack. Maybe you went out on the peninsula. Maybe you went to the Wedge. And you got back on the PCH and you rolled down through Crystal Cove State Park, heading south through Laguna Beach. Main Beach is reopened until noon, and by the end of the week, probably later, further on through South Laguna toward Dana Point, you said, gosh, I love living in California. And you rolled past Beach Avenue and into San Clemente, where eventually the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I will probably retire another decade because it's the greatest city in America. And if you had luck on your side, you just kept going through Camp Pendleton, the greatest 17-mile stretch in America. We're all enjoying it. It's here, and we can relax for a while. And the big news of the day you probably didn't even hear because it was on the Andrew Marr show, which is the equivalent of Chuck Todd's Meet the Press in Great Britain, Andrew Marr and the BBC. And he had on the head of AstraZeneca. And the head of AstraZeneca, which is a huge pharmaceutical company like Pfizer, like Johnson & Johnson. He said, we're going to have a vaccine in distribution by September. And he's fairly certain it's going to work. They're not going to know if it's going to work for sure. You know why? Because the number of COVID cases in Great Britain is plummeting so fast, they won't be able to do all of the trials they need to have 100% certainty. But he's, as far as a scientist could go without saying, as a scientist, he was sure, they think it's going to work. The therapeutic, there are 1,700 trials underway of various therapeutics and vaccines around the world. The entire world scientific focus is on this. Meanwhile, we are getting a more precise understanding of who it attacks, the elderly and the medically fragile, and the near invulnerability. It is not complete. There have been some tragic cases, and I would not ever underestimate the tragedy of losing a young adult, and we have seen those cases, or a child, and there have been a handful of those. And 100 kids have had the inflammatory disease that resembles Kawasaki that is linked to the virus. We know it's out there, we know it's dangerous, and we know it scares the living daylights out of our elderly and our infirm. So we will protect them. And I believe people ought to be wearing masks in supermarkets and when you're going to restaurants, and I know the wait staff is going to, but the country is reopening for summer. Now, I noticed that Notre Dame yesterday said, we're going to have college, like Larry Arnn said on Friday. Hillsdale's going to have college. Everyone's going to have college. And they're starting 2 weeks early at the Golden Dome, which is good because they're kind of slow there anyway. They could use those 2 extra weeks. At USC, they need an extra month, but then they're going to have to import some books because that's a new feature at USC. But they're all going to come back early, and then they're all going to go home at Thanksgiving. Smart. How smart, Americans adapt. Schools are going to reopen. And I tell you from the bottom of my heart, I think swimming pools ought to reopen. If you're listening to me and you run a pool, I spent 6 years as a guard. The peak of my career was the manager of Packard Park in Warren, Ohio. If you just limit attendance at the pools to those who are 50 and younger, and you tell people to bring their own chairs, and you have lifeguards who are under 25, and you have kids in their swim teams with swim coaches who are under 25, it's good for the kids. It's sanity for the parents. Packard Park Pool was where everybody in Warren mixed. Every class, every part of town would come. It was an enormous pool. We had, 12 guards a shift. And the country needs its swimming pools. Private, public, small, big, backyard, it needs. And what we know about the virus, it doesn't like sunshine. It does not want disinfectant. Just don't let grandma and grandpa go with you to the pool. And if they are fragile, don't let the kids near them. They understand. Everyone's got to understand, but there's no reason. The stats just do not back up not opening. What these kids will do in their apartments and their grim surroundings this summer if they haven't got a pool to go to, I do not know. Let's get common sense back in circulation in America. Coming back, hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Coming up, stay tuned. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. On Tuesday, after Memorial Day, the unofficial opening of summer was this weekend, and I must tell you, anecdotal evidence is not evidence of anything other than anecdotes. But I felt the country's door open. I saw with my own eyes people out and about, commerce beginning, people talking about plans, people making preparations to depart on summer vacation, people debating, let's get the pools open, people saying, when can we sit down at the restaurant on the sidewalk, people getting their ice cream, people standing in line, about 50-50 masks and the recognition we have to protect older people. You know, in my own personal life after the show today, I will go back to running on my favorite path, which has been too crowded for me with too many bikers. But now I feel like the science is in, and that if you're outside, you're basically safe. Don't go shout in people's faces. Don't go sneeze on people. Basically, you're safe if you're outside. And I believe that we turned a corner. So when I open up the newspaper, I get up at 4 a.m. this morning, and I start looking through the news to prepare for the show. And I see on the Wall Street Journal, optimism over reopening pushes global stocks higher. That's the headline. Number of experimental vaccines under development also buoys sentiment in markets. That's a subheader. At CNN Business, global stocks rise as reopening optimism takes hold. That's from Charisse Pham and Charles Riley, reporting from Hong Kong and London. Then over at the Financial Times, European stocks rise as lockdown easing boosts sentiment. So you see what's going on in the markets is a reflection of what people saw and sensed the world over. Now, if I have to put a scientific pin on the map, it's the Andrew Marr Show on BBC yesterday, which for our American friends, and I'm listened to around the world. People hear me around the world. They're up in Canada, they're listening in Hong Kong, they're listening to me around the world. And Andrew Marr is the BBC's Meet the Press. It's the most influential show in Great Britain on the weekend. And the head of AstraZeneca was on, and he said, look, we're going to have a vaccine in production and use by September. And we think it's going to work, but we won't be able to tell if it's going to work because there aren't enough people getting sick right now to test its efficacy. But we think it's going to work. All right, so there are 1,700 other such tests of therapies and vaccinations. Therapies are what you use when you're sick. Vaccinations are what you use to try and inoculate yourself against being sick. I am an optimist. I believe we have turned the corner. What do you think? Dick in Dayton, Ohio. What did you see, Dick? What do you think is going on out there?
Oh, good morning, Hugh. I'm like you. I see really people, they were cooped up so much. I see economy, and I see everything like the restaurants, the beauty salon. Everything's coming really nice now, It's great.
I think it is, Dick. Thank you, my friend. Let's go to Cleveland because we want the Indians back on the field at Progressive Park. Rick, what do you think? Do you think we're going to have Major League Baseball soon?
I think we will, and I think we ought to call this optimistic aspect called the Great Reopening. How do you like that? The Great Reopening.
I think it's underway. I saw it. I don't know what's going on. You can't physically see a country. And of course, if you watch the news, you're only seeing what a half dozen cameras show you. It's not really the news of the world. You have to spend a lot of time online. You have to talk to people. You have to call them up. You have to get outside. You have to really report. And I don't believe this is limited to the Beltway. I think the Beltway is, in fact, more cautious than the rest of the country.
Yeah, it is. And I've noticed there's meat in the counter now. It's not like being allocated, so that's cool.
Okay, very good. Ty in San Antonio, what do you think, Ty?
Listen, I don't want to get into it, and I want to be civil with you, brother, but as long as we have shows, that are supposed to be respected, like Meet the Press and different people that are willing to push the hysteria, we're never going to put this thing to bed. People are always going to look to the worst side of things. It's out there. It's waiting for me. I can't get back to my normal life because people like Chuck Todd. And
now stop, Ty. You said you weren't going to get in. Chuck did a great job this weekend. All right, goodbye. People cannot trash my friends with a great job. I played for you the entire interview. It was a great interview. So just people call up and try and trash my friends who they perceive as being other than moderate or other than down the. Just don't do it. By the way, we do so much research on my audience. And, a few of you out there don't want to hear from anyone who isn't conservative. A few of you. And I understand and I respect that. But the vast majority of my audience want to hear from people in the media, people like Peter Baker, people like Chuck Todd, people all over the spectrum, people from the news media, people from the Democratic. I have Chris Coons on tomorrow, Democratic senator from Delaware. And someone's going to say, why do you have a Democrat? Because the world is big. And we're all Americans, and we're fellow citizens, and we get along. And I think we should be buoyant right now. Tom in Florida, where I think Governor Ron DeSantis, along with Governor Newsom, is tied for first place in governors. What do you think, Tom? How is Florida looking? Which part of Florida, by the way?
Well, I'm in Bradenton, Florida, down by Bradenton Beach.
You bet.
And just south of Tampa. And I walk every Sunday morning, and this week there were about 10,000 people on the beach on Sunday. No, I didn't see one mask. And I think down here the jig is up because people are pretty confident in the governor, and we realize we had 2,000 cases out of 22 million people, or 2,000 deaths. So it's a 1 in 10,000 chance.
It's actually much lower than that if you're young and healthy. It is not a disease you want to get anyway because it is bad. It's a very tough 2 weeks, but it is not a disease that will kill you in most cases. I mean, in the overwhelming number of cases, unless you are elderly with very little natural reserve of ability to fight off infection, or if you are infirm in some way, and we want to take care of the fragile. We don't want to be irresponsible. We want to wear masks in shopping centers. We want to have hours set aside for older people to shop so they can be safe from asymptomatic child carriers. But there's no reason, in my view, to keep the pools shut. None, zero, zip. Thank you, Tom. Marty in California, what do you say? Marty, you're up early.
Yeah, I just woke up. Hugh, I'm old retired CB.
Where did you build things? CB's build things. And whenever I go to Arlington, and we did not go yesterday because the president went.
I got this free 11-month vacation in Vietnam.
Oh, you did? So you're one of the original CBs. They did not start until fairly late. Have you seen the CB Memorial in Arlington Cemetery, by the way?
Oh, hey, I wear the emblem on my CB hat. I was at Riverside National Cemetery yesterday. It was absolutely mobbed. It was incredible how many people were out there. Next year, we're going to go the Sunday before. We're going to go on Memorial Day. But we saw that tremendous flyby. I think it was either 17 or 19 classic airplanes coming through. It was really unbelievable. Hey, summer's here.
Summer's here, and I think country's reopened. I think the governor.
Even at a restaurant yesterday in Beaumont, we were sitting outside in the patio area.
Well, yeah, the patios are okay. Basically the guidance is if you're outside, you're fine. That is basically the guidance. Hey, thank you, my friend. Let me get to Jersey City and talk to John as well from Beaumont, California, to the other side of the country. John in Jersey City. What do you see, John?
Hey, you. Good morning. I just want to let you know that people are very anxious here. I am a commercial driver. I drive a big truck for a big recycling company. And I see a lot of action. I see it's starting to come alive, but people are still fearful here. There's no traffic going into the city, to the tunnels. New York City itself is like a ghost town. So
well, you've talked about the one exception to the rule. The one exception is Manhattan. I really do believe it will be the last to come back. The very last. Well, and that might distort the coverage of the news since the news is headquartered in Manhattan.
Well, I live in Central Jersey, and people were doing barbecues yesterday. There was cars all over the street. I go to ShopRite, a big supermarket. They're rocking and rolling, and all the shelves are full.
Now, I got to ask you, though, John, I got to ask you, a lot of Jets fans don't want football to come back. Is that true?
Well, you know what? They break my heart every year.
I know. They said just skip it. It's easier on you. So
they put and don't lump us in with Pittsburgh, please. Whatever you do.
No, I'm not. No. Jets fans are smart fans. It's just they're long suffering. Unlike the Browns, they have no future, and it's just very sad for you guys. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. The President of the United States has tweeted. The president of the H1N1 swine flu was a complete and total disaster. Even polls on the matter were terrible. President's starting to limber up for the campaign. 6 months of Ollie Frazier ahead. I don't know that Joe can go this distance. I really don't know. Don't go anywhere, America. 1-800-520-1234. Do you see what I see? Which is America reopening. The doors swinging open. People outside. People saying, the virus, we know about it. We'll take precautions, but we're going back to life. Let me know what you think on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Hey, folks, I'm talking to Ken Starr. It's the Eric Metaxas Show. I'm holding in my hand his latest book. It's called Contempt. How would you answer someone who says what you did with Clinton is just about the same thing that Mueller et al. Did with Trump? What is the difference in your mind of your investigation and his?
The end product was we found absolute ironclad crimes. 14 different people were convicted in the Whitewater investigation, and for very substantive offenses. A number of the prosecutions, I don't say this critically, but it's a difference, in the Mueller investigation were convicted of so-called process crimes. Think of General Flynn, right? That, of course, is now being revisited. We will see what happens. I'm making no predictions about that. But with respect to the President of the United States, we found clear-cut evidence of crimes, perjury and obstruction of justice. And that's all laid out in the Starr referral. What Bob found, and what Bob Mueller found, was that there was no Russian collusion. Vladimir Putin, according to the report, it would be intriguing to get Bob Mueller to say here were his sources if he could reveal them. He might not be able to. Vladimir Putin, after the election, calls together some of his closest advisors
22 minutes after the hour, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thanks for joining me. I don't know what this music is. It's not on my playlist. It's banned. Today is a great day in sports history. Generalissimo, do you know what happened today in 1993 in baseball?
I have no idea.
Jose Canseco was playing in the outfield for the Texas Rangers when the Cleveland Indians' Carlos Martinez came to bat.
Bounce one off his head over the wall?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the greatest moment in sports history. Cleveland Indians, of course, being involved in that. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It is summer in an unofficial sense. In an unofficial sense, it is summer. Yesterday was Memorial Day. We salute those who have fallen. We did the Semper Fi and America's Fun show yesterday. Thanks to all of you who donated. I mean, my goodness, you were so generous. SemperFiFun.org to support Semper Fi Fun and America's Fun. Now I'd like to take your attention back to our Angel Tree effort. You know, we have got 1 in 28 children in America. It's hard to believe, but 1 in 28 kids in America have mom or dad or both parents behind bars. An Angel Tree initiative by Prison Fellowship takes care of these kids. We have a brand new initiative this summer because of the COVID-19 situation, as Prison Fellowship President James Ackerman tells us.
We have to plan this year, in worst case scenario, for Angel Tree. So if there's another COVID outbreak, we have to figure out a different way of facilitating Angel Tree. So there's a whole lot of things going on. We're really excited about where we are as a ministry and how God has pivoted us to be relevant at this time. And, you know, we're just honored to be able to serve in the way that God is allowing us to.
And we want you to join us in doing that. Thus far, the Salem hosts, my colleagues on this network, the syndicated hosts, Mike Gallagher and Dennis Prager and Seb Gorka and Larry Elder, have together raised close to $300,000 to send kids boxes of blessing, sports equipment, good food coupons, age-appropriate Bibles, all sorts of great stuff to connect with them, with the Angel Tree Ministry, and where possible to send them to camp. But the more you give, the more that Angel Tree can do for these children. And again, it's a long, hot summer ahead. The summer doesn't get any cooler because of COVID. And if there are no pools, it's going to be even tougher. So please be as generous as you possibly can be by visiting HughHewitt.com, finding the Angel Tree banner, or you can call 888-206-2764. Let me also bring you the business story of the morning, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They are Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Best loan officers ever. They lend you the money. They don't refer you to somebody else. They take your application. They have a team, handpicked, personally supervised. They do a lot of the loans themselves. You'll hear from Andrew and Todd in the course of that. If you need to refinance your house because you need to save a few extra $100 a month, or you want to buy a piece of property, or you want to, I talked yesterday with a friend of mine, who's a decade younger than me, but has children who are about to enter the home buying age. And I said, you ought to become a co-borrowing, non-occupying owner, meaning you put your name on the line when you borrow money for your kid or your grandkid to buy a house. Because with interest rates this low, do it now. Do it now. And go to AndrewandTodd.com. Fill out a couple of questions, and they will tell you what you qualify for. Or you can call them at 888-888-1172. They've done thousands of mortgages. They did mine when I moved back to the Beltway after 30 years. They can help you. They can help you save money if you're a senior and you got to get more money out of your house because things are tight. Your portfolio went down in the crash, hadn't come back yet, although markets are rising across the world this morning. AndrewandTodd.com. There is a headline in the Wall Street Journal, which I just don't understand. Mortgage credit tightens, creating drag on any economic recovery. Now, I talked to Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian a lot. They're big sponsors of the show. I talk to them a lot. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have asked people for more documentation. They've made it a little bit more tough. And mortgage rates themselves are about a point higher than you normally would think, but they're still at all-time lows, because of the uncertainty that the virus has brought about. But as the reopening occurs, watch that 10-year bond. Just watch it. Right now, it's at 0.66%, but oil is up to $34. It's up 2.5% this morning. Oil is a reflector of restarting the engine of the economy. That 10-year Treasury is going to go up, and interest rates are there low, waiting for you to use them. Don't get left behind, but do call me with what you think is going on in America. 1-800-520-1234 connects you with the Hugh Hewitt Show. Do you agree with me? Did America reopen and nobody tell us? 1-800-520-1234 connects you to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Riddle me this. Who said this? Quote, "There is no one way to be black." Take it from somebody who has seen both sides of the debate about whether I'm black enough, end of quote. Who do you think said that? Joe Biden's boss, Barack Obama. There is no one way to be black. Take it from somebody who's seen both sides of the debate about whether I'm black enough, end of quote. Do you know that that assertion was made against Obama when Obama ran for Congress against Bobby Rush, who's still in the House? Bobby Rush characterized him as not really black. He's not really from the city. He's from Honolulu. He went to Harvard. He teaches at University of Chicago. He lives in Hyde Park. He really isn't one of us. Hello? That same charge was used against Biden's boss, and now Biden is using it. Is this thing on?
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
But then again, this is how they roll. Remember this gentleman?
I don't know how anyone of Hispanic heritage could be a Republican. Okay? Do I need to say more?
I don't know how many times I have been accused of being, quote, put here
33 minutes after the hour, America, one of my favorite Loggins and Messina songs, because I run by the Potomac a lot. And I love watching the river. It's one of America's great rivers. It just has been any river wherever you are. There were people by rivers, by lakes, in pools, at beaches yesterday as America reopened for the summer, and I feel it. I believe it's real. The campaign also got underway. Look, we have a 6-month campaign ahead of us. It's going to be just Ali Frazier. For those of you of the right age, you can remember the 3 great fights between Ali and Frazier. This is all rolled into one. And it did not go, the opening round did not go well for Joe Biden. It started on Friday, right after I got off the air. He was on Charlemagne the God, and this was the exchange about which people spoke all weekend, cut number 2.
Thanks so much. That's really our time. I apologize.
You can't do that to black media.
I can't do that to white media and black media because my wife has to go on at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
I'm in trouble.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump.
It cut out. What happened? Did it freeze up on it?
Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump.
Stop right there. If you have trouble deciding between me and Trump, you ain't black. Honest to goodness, Charlemagne the God is a huge deal on the radio. He's a huge deal. I mean, he's not me, but he's a huge deal. And I think he was dumbfounded. And later on, he said this basically means that the vice president has to put an African American on the ticket. And I agree with him. It's just taking for granted the black vote. And if President Trump gets into double digits, this election is over and it's hard to pull. I think it's very hard to pull. Then Joe Biden went on with Joe Kernan on CNBC, which is the closest he gets to a tough interview, cut number 3.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
Yes, you heard that right. Can we replay that again, please? Cut number 3.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
Just one more time, because I just think no one believes it. This is not altered. This is not edited. This is Joe split screen. If you're watching on YouTube at the Hugh Hewitt channel on YouTube, you can watch this yourself. Joe is on split screen with Joe Kernan, cut number 3.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
I'm going to beat Joe Biden. I'm telling you, cut number 4. Then he has a very hard-hitting approach to China, which is about to bring martial law to Hong Kong. Cut number 4.
I'd be at the UN with my UN ambassador, and I'd be insisting and calling out what the United States has always done. Overwhelming violation not only of an agreement, but of human rights. The silence on our part has been devastating for people around the world. All it does is encourage thugs and dictators, which in fact I think the president has some kind of affinity for. Look at who he embraces and look who he pokes in the eye. The idea that we would remain silent. Look, we have governed not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. That's why the rest of the world has repaired to us. It's the power of our example. And we should not remain silent. We should be calling the rest of the world to condemn their actions.
You know, I guess the vice president doesn't pay any attention to what, for example, Robert O'Brien did on Meet the Press, which is condemn the General Secretary Xi. And when the vice president said that President Trump was xenophobic for stopping flights inbound from China, don't forget that. Don't forget that. Donald Trump swung back on Full Measure with Cheryl Atkinson yesterday, cut number 12.
What do you think is Joe Biden's strongest feature as a competitor in politics?
Well, I would have said experience, but he doesn't really have experience because I don't think he remembers what he did yesterday. So how is that experience? He's been there a long time. He was never known as a smart person.
Pick one good thing. Okay, what is his weakest point?
I can't tell you. I mean, I'm really serious. He's got many. I could talk about weak points all day long.
That was Donald Trump with Cheryl Atkinson, and I think the jab at the beginning is what you're going to hear a lot of. Cut number 12 again. Cheryl Atkinson sits down with the president and asks him Biden's strongest point. Cut number 12.
What do you think is Joe Biden's strongest feature as a competitor in politics?
Well, I would have said experience, but he doesn't really have experience because I don't think he remembers what he did yesterday. So
Stop.
How is that experience?
You know what he's saying? He said you can't have experience if you don't remember what you did. You can't have learned any lessons from the past if you are losing your grip on the president. And I'll tell you, when I hear things like cut number 3, play it again. Media Matters, this is for you, Emo. Cut number 3.
I'm prepared to say that I have a record of over 40 years and that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
Look, I know that goes on my board, by the way. I have 2 full lines on my board at the California production studio of just Joe Bidenisms. And you ain't black and I'm going to beat Joe Biden are 2 in 2 days. What's it going to be like when he actually starts to campaign? JD in Las Vegas, how is the reopening going in Las Vegas, JD? 1-800-520-1234, connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Well, Lake Mead is jam-packed. They actually had to stop people from coming. Las Vegas is opening up. I think we should have shut down the national media for 3 months, not the country.
Well, you know, I think it was a good idea what the president did. I believe strongly that we would have been in much worse shape if we had not done the shutdown. We need time for therapeutics to figure out what it is, to figure out how to treat it, to figure out ICU wards, isolation wards. It's been tough, but we are back. And I really do believe that. I also want to play for you a little bit of the president at Arlington National Cemetery yesterday, just in case you didn't hear it. Cut number 7, the president talking about our flag.
I stand before you at this noble fortress of American liberty to pay tribute to the immortal souls who fought and died to keep us free. Earlier today, the First Lady and I laid a wreath in their sacred honor at Arlington National Cemetery. Now we come together to salute the flag they gave their lives to so boldly and brilliantly defend. And we pledge in their cherished memories that this majestic flag will proudly fly forever.
That was not, by the way, at Arlington. That was at Fort McHenry, the site of the Star-Spangled Banner. I had got my... if I had a producer, I wouldn't make a mistake like that. But I always correct my mistakes. I'm eager to correct my mistakes. I'm very happy to tell you. I said Arlington. That was at Fort McHenry. The president did go to Arlington, and he said this, cut number 9.
In this place more than 200 years ago, American patriots stood their ground.
Stop. I did it again. This is Fort McHenry, not Arlington. Is Generalissimo around? Is my producer there today?
What is your problem?
It's not Arlington. It's Fort McHenry
Okay.
audio. Just telling you. Cut number 9, Fort McHenry yesterday.
In this place more than 200 years ago, American patriots stood their ground and repelled a British invasion in the Battle of Baltimore during the War of 1812. Early on a September morning in 1814, the British fleet launched an assault on this peninsula. From the harbor, some 30 British warships attacked this stronghold. Rockets rained down, bombs burst in the air, and the deck of one ship, a gallant young American, was held captive. His name was Francis Scott Key. For 25 hours, Key watched in dismay as fire crashed down upon this ground. But through torrents of rain and smoke and the din of battle, Key could make out 15 broad stripes and 15 bright stars, barraged and battered, but still there. American forces did not waver. They did not retreat. They stared down the invasion and the hell that they had to endure. The fact is, they held like nobody could have held before. They held this fort. The British retreated. Independence was saved. Francis Scott Key was so inspired by the sight of our flag in the battle waged that the very grounds that he fought on became hallowed and he wrote a poem. His ageless words became the anthem of our nation, the Star-Spangled Banner. Every time we sing our anthem, every time its rousing chorus swells our hearts with pride, we renew the eternal bonds of loyalty to our fallen heroes. We think of the soldiers who spend their final heroic moments on distant battlefields to keep us safe at home. We remember the young Americans who never got the chance to grow old, but whose legacy will outlive us all. In every generation, these intrepid souls kissed goodbye to their families and loved ones. They took flight in planes, set sail in ships, and marched into battle with our flag, fighting for our country, defending our people.
He also took a moment to pay tribute to the Gold Star families of America, which I want to make sure you hear. Cut number 11.
To every Gold Star family here today and all across our land, our debt to you is infinite and everlasting. We stand with you today and all days to come, remembering and grieving for America's greatest heroes. In spirit and strength, in loyalty and love, in character and courage, they were larger than life itself. They were angels sent from above, and they are now rejoined with God in the glorious kingdom of heaven. Wherever the stars and stripes fly, at our schools, our churches, town halls, firehouses, and national monuments, it is made possible because there are extraordinary Americans who are willing to brave death so that we can live in freedom and live in peace.
That is so well said, and it reminds me of yesterday, Semper Fi and America's Fund fundraiser that I do annually on Memorial Day. Thank you for your generosity. If you didn't hear it, you can go and listen to it online. SemperFiFund.org is where you contribute. But those Gold Star families and all military families are served by HonorBoundCoffee.com. And if you don't get your coffee from HonorBoundCoffee.com, I'd like you to make the switch today. You hear words like that, you salute Gold Star families, you remember Francis Scott Key in the Battle of Baltimore at Fort McHenry, and you say to yourself, how can I help? Well, you can help with every cup of coffee you drink if you order Honor Bound Coffee, because 100% of the profits, 100% of the profits from Honor Bound Coffee go to support military families, starting with Semper Fi and America's Fund, which I think is the greatest military family charity in America. But to be a part of that, you have to subscribe. And it's great coffee, by the way. It's terrific coffee. HonorBoundCoffee.com. Don't forget as well, ReliefFactor.com. Same people. Pete and Seth Talbot. Wonderful, wonderful people. Started ReliefFactor.com. Extraordinary success. It works so well. The only supplement I take. That, after 4 or 5 years of explosive growth of tens of thousands of people coming to get their Icarian, Curcumin, Resveratrol, Omega from their daily dose of ReliefFactor.com, the packet with 4 pills that are so easy to take, open, and swallow. They said, how do we give back? And they started Honor Bound Coffee. It's a great father and son team. They're terrific. I see them at least once a year, check in on the business, help them select Semper Fi and America's Fund as their first charity to give Honor Bound Coffee profits to. Get ReliefFactor.com, get HonorBoundCoffee.com, and come back for today's final segment with Tim Alberta of Politico here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
On a personal level, Mr. Secretary, not as Secretary of State, do you believe that the Communist Chinese Party has told us the truth on any significant issue in the last 3 months?
Well, I'm sure there have been things they've accurately described to us, but it's pretty clear at this point that the Chinese Communist Party is one of its central challenges in any institution that is authoritarian is the absence of the ability for information to flow freely. You saw this, Hugh, in the weeks before this. They decided to kick out U.S. journalists from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post. You saw what happened when doctors raised their hand and said, hey, I think we have a problem. I think we potentially have a human-to-human virus, and it's spread. And they suppressed that by coercion and worse. Those are the kind of things that authoritarian regimes do. It's the nature of those regimes. And as a result of that, the information didn't get to the right places. And so for days and weeks, the world didn't know what was confronting it. And in a virus like this, those first hours and days and weeks are the most critical in stopping the spread. and the Chinese Communist Party failed to do that properly. I'll say this too, Hugh. We still need transparency today. We need openness today. We are still in the middle of this. We still don't know the precise source and origin spot of the virus. That will turn out to be important for epidemiologists and experts to help us get to the backside of this. We still need that kind of openness, and we urge every country that has information about the virus and data sets and is working on a vaccine or therapeutics to share that information broadly in the scientific community.
This is Albert Mohler for townhall.com. A chilling headline ran over Easter weekend from CNN. Louisville police officers to record license plate numbers of Easter weekend churchgoers. Over the course of this pandemic, I've argued that churches should follow generally applicable shelter-in-place orders, that these orders and guidelines do not violate religious liberty. Indeed, we ought to comply with them out of love of neighbor. But if policies single out churches and religious groups, it becomes an entirely different issue, an unconstitutional violation of religious liberty. Over the course of the last several weeks, some government officials have crossed the line. In the case of Louisville, it took a restraining order from United States District Court Judge Justin Walker to curtail Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher's attempt to prevent even drive-in church gatherings. The judge said, quote, "The mayor's decision is stunning, and it is beyond all reason unconstitutional." Consider this. In America, in 2020, comes the threat that they're taking names and they're taking numbers. It's extremely important that all American Christians take note, and in a hurry. I'm Albert Mohler.
ADF, fighting for those whose religious freedom is being violated.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I want to bring you a story from the BBC because I think while it is specific to England and the United Kingdom, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, it is nevertheless applicable to the world. It's going on around the world. Between 11 and 15 May, there were 4,210 death registrations mentioning COVID-19 across the United Kingdom. The BBC News reports in a headline story, "Coronavirus death fall to 6-week low." Down from 4,426 the previous week, it is the lowest weekly figure since the 3,800 total for the week ending April 10. Coronavirus accounted for just over 25% of all deaths in the United Kingdom. In the week to April 17th, when deaths from the virus reached their peak, the figure was just under 40%. Lockdown measures were introduced on 23rd March in the United Kingdom. The total number of death registrations rose by 10% every week until May 15th. Then it's begun to fall. And the deaths are falling more dramatically in the under 50 age group. And that is the story, is that we are getting clarity now on who is at risk. And I told you already the CDC the numbers that the CDC puts out makes it abundantly clear that the risk of mortality to children under the age of 18 is far lower than, for example, the risk of drowning. So there are risks everywhere. If you keep kids away from swim lessons, if you keep kids in their apartments, if you keep kids locked up with abusive parents, if you keep kids monitored closely and not let them roam in the summer in the way that they're used to roaming in the summer, you risk all sorts of pathology. It seems to me that the country has to put aside excessive fear, not caution, not preparation, not prudence, not wisdom. They have to listen to Dr. Birx and other people, but they're beginning to say the same thing, which is you can't lock down the country forever, especially not in the summertime. And I don't have young children living at home now. Our kids are grown and moved out, thank goodness. But I don't know what we would have done without pool time, swim team, and getting them out of the house, and lifeguards watching them. And I know some parents are nuts about lifeguards. They don't believe in allowing lifeguards to do their work. But I know that you've just got to reopen pools across the country. You just have to. Now, there are some debates underway, which I understand fully, and I'm happy to agree whatever the local management wants to do. About we're removing all the furniture, bring your own lawn furniture, your own fold-up chair, your own blanket, and sit spaced apart. I'm fine with that. Lifeguards should not be over 25 years old. By the way, it's never been my experience, ever. I was the senior man in the area at Warren Packard Park Pool in the summer of 1977, which was my last summer lifeguarding. Then I got a real job out in San Clemente for David Eisenhower and Richard Nixon. But in the summer of 1977, I ran Packard Park Pool, for those of you who know Warren, Ohio. Big pool, 1,000 kids a day, lots of people, all types of people. And older people would come and sit all day. Well, they shouldn't come. It should be a refuge for children and the parents of young children, people under 50. They should not come if they're over 50. And you should bring your own lawn chair. Go to the Kmart, pick up a $14 chair, borrow one. They're not, or just bring a blanket and sit on the grass. There's grass at every pool. Now, some pools, that's not true. Waddell Park Pool in Nile, where I began my storied career as a lifeguard at the age of 17. I did that for 5 years, different kinds of pools. That's the best job in the world in the summer is to be a lifeguard. But you can't go to summer without pools. And it doesn't seem to me that the science supports closing them. The science supports mitigation. The science supports hanging up a sign to say, be careful if you go home and you have elderly parents in your life. Your children may be asymptomatic carriers. You might use it as places of public education. Don't go bother Nana and Grandpa. Leave them alone. Zoom with them. Don't go see them. If you live with them, maybe you ought not to come to the pool. But for 95% of America, open the doggone pool. This is not rocket science. And I hope if they have a briefing at the White House today, John Roberts at Fox, who always asks the best questions along with Steve Hollins from Reuters, someone said, what do you think about city pools, Dr. Birx? And what about common sense restrictions, like limiting it to people who are under 50? Or maybe you have to have your parent has to be under 45. I know it's age discrimination, but that is not a constitutionally suspect class. It's perfectly acceptable to restrict pools. And some old activists will say that age discrimination. No, it's not. It's common sense about keeping you safe and making the pool less likely to be a place where people are concerned. Maybe you wear your masks on the lawn as well. I'm going to wear my bandana when I go trundling along this morning. Common sense, America, common sense. Conservative, common sense. Like Robert O'Brien on Meet the Press yesterday when Chuck Todd asked him about wearing a mask. Chuck, he pulled his mask out. National security advice. Chuck, I wear this when I'm near the president if I can't stand 6 feet away from him. And we wear it in the White House. Common sense, America. We are a common sense country. It was built, as de Tocqueville said, on common sense. You don't head out into the frontier with a wagon and an axe if you haven't got a lick of common sense between everyone in the wagon. You're going to end up not going very far and not lasting very long. Time for American common sense to take over. And it is. Why I'm optimistic today and why you should come back tomorrow for more good news. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. We'll be back tomorrow with the next Hugh Hewitt Show. Senator.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.